Go ahead and call this meeting of the Town Board of Commissioners Workshop to order. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kathleen. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Want to give you more right?
Okay, and we have a motion regarding the consent agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Kathleen?
Second.
Thank you, Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. And that takes us to number 4, in-depth discussion and topics. And our first one, Bryant is going to educate us about the update on the Environmental Protection Agency's lead and copper rule revisions. Good evening, Bryant.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, sir. As the mayor said, I'm going to do a quick update on a quick presentation on the new lead and copper rule. We have some impending deadlines coming up, so I wanted to let everybody know like what we're doing to meet them and what some of the communications that are going to be going out to the community, just so that y'all are aware, and I'm sure you'll get calls and request more information, and we were hoping to give you that information when they called you back. So that said, try this one. Okay. Lead and copper rule. So in 2021, the EPA came out with an updated lead and copper rule. There was already an existing lead and copper rule that we were complying with that dated back to the 80s. This is the new version. It's a much more stringent rule, and it requires a detailed inventory of all of our water services in our system, as well as water services that are on the customer side of our meter. So that is a very big sea change from the previous lead and copper rule, the one that we're currently following. We're not necessarily required to know what they have. Now we are required to know what they have. And most importantly, we are required to present this inventory to the state by October 16th of this year. So in less than a month, we will be submitting an inventory to the EQ. So this is what the inventory has to have. Like I mentioned, we have to have the system-owned utilities and services inventory. So between the meter and the main, what we maintain, we have to have an inventory of that. We also have to have an inventory of what is called privately owned here. So services that are on private property from the entry point into the building out to the meter. So this is a big change for us because we've never really inventoried that. We never really tracked that. We're now required to have an inventory of it and submit it to the state. There are 4 different classifications that we can use. So there's lead service lines, and we'll get into the distinctions in a minute. Galvanized requiring replacement, non-lead or unknown. It has to be publicly accessible, so the public has to have access to the total inventory. Our town is not big enough to have to post a map on the website, but I think we're going to go forward with that as our plan is to have that map be available. We have the resources and the ability to do that, and we recognize our neighbors are doing that as well. And the premise plumbings, this is the plumbing once you get past the foundation, does not have to be in the inventory. So we are not asking customers to give us that. We're just, but the EPA does call it out as something that does not have to be inventoried. So here's some examples of the 4 different types. I'm sorry, I forgot. I have some show and tell later. If anybody wants to see what some of these look like in the flesh, so to speak. We have plastic, and they can be really one of 3 colors: white, black, or blue. You'll see that coming into the foundation. Galvanized, which is a steel pipe that was coated with a galvanic protection to help prevent corrosion. Lead, which is fully lead, and then copper, which looks like a penny. We have to inventory these using evidence-based records, methods, or techniques. And the EPA goes into length about what that means, but in short, we can't just say, I think this part of town probably doesn't have lead, so let's go ahead and say it doesn't have lead. Like we have to use record drawings from old construction projects. We have to use building permit applications. We are allowed to use laws. So North Carolina banned lead in 1987. So we are allowed to assume after in 1986, they banned lead. So we're saying 1987 forward, any home built in 1987 forward, we are allowed to assume no lead. we're allowed to assume that builders follow the statute. If we don't have any of those things, we have to say it's unknown. And that's gonna be important in a minute. And the state requires documentation of field verification before making assumptions, so we can't eliminate unknowns because we believe, we've heard this neighborhood doesn't have a lot of it. We have to actually have either one of these things or physically verified it in the field. So I have a separate slide on what's called lead goosenecks. So this is a lead gooseneck that came out of our system. It is a connection between a galvanized header, which is that corroded looking thing on the bottom of the picture there, and the main. These were used very frequently back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s to connect galvanized lines to our distribution system. These are treated as a very special and unique thing by the regulation. They are not considered lead service lines. So we do not have to tell these people they have lead. They are not considered lead requiring replacement. They don't make that galvanized that you see there be replaced. However, the EPA does say when we find these, we do have to take them out. So they're not part of the inventory, but they do have to come out. They will not receive a lead notification letter. If we believe they have a lead gooseneck, they will not get either a galvanized requiring replacement or lead letter. This is what it looks. I'm not going to expect you guys to see the detail here on the spreadsheet, but we attached a screenshot of this just to show you how complicated this spreadsheet is and how many rows and columns and things we're going to have to fill out and submit by October 16th. If we fail to get this big spreadsheet filled out and submitted by October 16th, it's considered a tier 3 violation, or I'm sorry, we have to do a tier 3 notification to our customers, which basically means we would just reference it in our annual report that we failed to meet the deadline. That said, we have every intention of meeting the deadline. We should not have to do that. And we have to submit it in that approved format like you see there. The biggest thing, I think the most impactful part of this is going to be the public notification piece. We must notify customers that are lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or unknown, if we don't know what they have. Within 30 days of having submitted this inventory, we must send out a notification. So there's some ambiguity. Does that mean they have to have received it at 30 days, or do we have to have mailed it within 30 days? We're going to go ahead and plan for and schedule as though they will receive it, ensure they received it by November 16th. There is very specific language that has to go in this notification, and it's in that green box down there at the bottom. And this is kind of scary language, but I kind of go back again to, we don't have a lot of known lead service lines. We're being forced to put this language in to follow the EPA statute, but the actual effect on our residents and on our customers, we do not think will approach anything like this. We are allowed to have contextual language in the letter, and we've worked very extensively with public affairs to help kind of explain why this is there and be very clear that this is not something that we believe our residents are truly exposed to just because we just don't have that many lead service lines. Because we have a lot of unknowns, we have to tell them that there may be lead, and this is why lead is bad. The notice also has to include information about how to verify your service line and steps you can take to reduce lead exposure. The EPA does also require those things to be in the notice. So when they send those out, you will see those as well. So this is a screenshot of the notification. We've adjusted the language a little bit, but this is basically what it's going to look like. We do not have any documented history of lead service lines. We are very fortunate in that respect. You go to a place like Boston or Detroit, they have literally tens of thousands of these and have a very expensive multi-year program to address these. We do not have any known history of them being extensively installed at Hillsborough at all. However, we've got about 3,000 unknowns right now on the customer side. And that really is just a function of, our record keeping in our databases. Up until now, we have not tracked stuff as robustly as some of the other municipalities may have done. So that's really why so many of these letters are going to go out, is because we have to send a letter to somebody that's unknown and we have to have that language in it. But that's why they're getting this letter, is because it's unknown. Virtually all of the notifications fall into this category, like I mentioned before: unknown, not because of lead, not because it's galvanized requiring replacement. And I don't think I defined it earlier. Galvanized requiring replacement is if a galvanized line is downstream of a lead service line, not a lead gooseneck, a lead service line, then it's galvanized requiring replacement. But we don't think we have any of those either. This is a screenshot, and there'll be a legend and everything else of the inventory map that we're going to post on the town's webpage. We should have that link available now. Yes. So if you want to go to the town's webpage, you will see our lead page has a link to the map, has a link to how to do your inventory, to self-inventory your site. You can address lookup and look at your address and determine if we know that you have lead or not. And there's information there on how to contact town staff and provide us verification. We're hopeful that a lot of people will reach out to us with their own inventories. Or, you know, hey, I just had my house redone and yep, we had galvanized and we took it all out. Here's a copy of the bill I got from the plumber, done. I can switch you over to being known. So we're hoping we get a good response. The feedback we've gotten, unfortunately, from local municipalities is they have not gotten great response. Durham, for example, only got 5% response rate on postcards they sent out, and they offered a $30 bill credit and only got 5% response. So right now hopefully that's indication that there's not a ton of concern in the community about this, if we're not getting responses back on postcards, but we did not feel like that was a very effective engagement method, just given how it's gone for other municipalities. Like we mentioned on the customer webpage, there's going to be a place to follow up, so you can do self-verification. We're going to have a link where you can go in and fill all that information out. We do need documentation. We can't just accept, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's plastic, or it's probably copper. Why are you asking? Like, we need a little bit of documentation with it because the EPA does require it. We have to provide these notices annually. So, and we have a 3-year period where we're allowed to refine our inventory and kind of knock the number of unknowns down. After that, we go into the replacement phase. So we have to send an annual notification this year and then each of the next 3 years to people that are still unknown. So if you email us or contact us through the website and tell us that and provide the documentation that you do not have a lead service line, we can take you off the mailing list, one less mailer next year. Future steps. So that's what's happening in the next 30 days. Starting early next year, we have to start a lead sampling program at daycares and child care centers, as well as we did have any lead service lines. If we do identify any, we have to add them to the testing pool. That begins January of next year. Regardless, there will be a significant increase in the number of amount of testing we have to do. We have accommodated that in this year's budget. We do plan on offering lead testing for anybody that is concerned. So depending on our response rate on that, we may have to pursue more funding as part of the next fiscal year. We also recommend a contract to field verify some of these services, just again, given the low response rates that adjacent municipalities have had with mailers. Those are expensive, but you are allowed to extrapolate those results. So if you go out and do field verification, I put a table here to the right, if we can get the number of unknowns knocked down through this mailing campaign, we can reduce the number of sites we have to physically verify before we're allowed to extrapolate those results townwide. Just for a ballpark estimate, right now, most adjacent municipalities are seeing somewhere between $300 to $400 per service to inventory. So if we have to do 300 or 400 services, you're looking at well into 6 figures for a contract. So if we could, we're hoping to leverage our citizens and our residents to try to get a reduction in the number of unknowns we have to deal with, so we can reduce the number of service lines that have to be field verified later. And the DEQ does allow statistic extrapolation, like I mentioned here before. The main thing too is, we'd also going to have to work with homeowners on like rights of entry, stuff like that. We have to go pretty far into private property for these. So in addition to the cost implications, certainly the headaches that come with it. After 3 years, whatever you have in your inventory, that is now your lead service line replacement program. So you have to eliminate 10% every year for 10 years. And what really stings is if you go out, dig up a service, find it's unknown after that 3-year window, you don't get to count that towards your 10%. So if you have 1,000 services, you must replace 100 a year or eliminate all the unknowns in the first year. So we're very motivated to try to get this number down. So that's why we came back with this recommendation for additional field verification, so that we don't have that count against us in year 4. I said I can take some. A big thank you, by the way, before we get into questions, to Catherine and her group. They did a ton of work in a very short amount of time to help us put this website together, mailer together. So big thank you to them. Did I say any questions?
The COG actually had a huge presentation. That was the evening's presentation to delegates earlier this year. I think those materials may be still available. And it was approached more on a regional, but yeah, even then, the electeds were concerned but the municipalities across the region, it was more than just Durham. I mean, nobody was getting responses.
Nobody's getting any responses. And so like, for example, Wassa basically just drew a couple crews and said, you're gonna go check 5, 6, 7, 800 of these, and we're just gonna make a project out of this and be done with it. Because we're just not getting engagement on it, which again, I'm hoping that that mirrors to some extent the level of concern in the community. I think most people have gotten the message, we just don't have, it's not like, you know, we're not the next Flint or Newark when it comes to this stuff, like, we just don't have enough of it.
Right, does the obligation to replace the known leads that you discovered extend on the customer side of the meter?
So I'm gonna be very careful how I phrase this, and I can tell a lawyer wrote this with all deference to Bob here. But it was, the town needs to create a set of circumstances under which the private side lead services are replaced. Doesn't say we have to do it, but it does say we have to compel it to be done. And we're not eligible for any federal funding if we do not pay for the customer side replacement. So they're not telling you have to do it, while telling you have to do it. But that said, we don't have any evidence that we've got really any lead services at all.
So of the 3,000 unknowns, that's out of how many?
Just under 7,000. So just, we're in the mid 40% on unknowns.
And then an example you had before where plumber comes in or somebody comes in and they switch out, or they notice whatever, are they required by law now to switch that out on the private side?
Yeah, they're like, after 1986, if they find it, they must take it out. Like they can't leave it in place anymore. The plumbing inspector won't sign off on it. So I'm allowed to do that. Like, oh yeah, back in 1993, we got all the pipes replaced under our house now to the street. Here's a receipt from the plumber that was done. I don't have to even see on there that so many linear feet of copper used or whatever. I'm allowed to assume that the plumber followed the law.
Got few different questions. So on the gooseneck pipes, even though the residents don't have to receive notification, what's the administrative hurdle to doing so, and can we provide that notification?
It's a little dicey because Hillsborough was unique in the way it used galvanized lines. So we had, a lot of our streets, we have a galvanized main where the galvanized line is actually manifolded directly to it. We didn't use lead goosenecks. It's actually harder to do it that way, but we chose the high road and didn't use the lead goosenecks. So on some of the other ones, we have found lead goosenecks and taken them out. So it gets to be a function of assumptions, right? Like we don't know, like we don't want to assume that all the galvanized lines have lead goosenecks because it's probably not a safe assumption. In fact, most of them don't. We know some areas where we've got pockets of them in town, but that's only because we've already dug them out and replaced them. You know, so that's, we short of not getting into confirmation bias, like it's very difficult for us to really predict where they are.
Okay, a few more. You want me to just run through? Okay, so I'm also interested because in another slide, it mentioned daycares and other things. What about schools and congregate living? And specifically, I'm thinking about the prison that's located here in Hillsborough.
I think prisons are included, but schools are included. Certified childcare centers are included. I don't think congregate living is included.
K-12.
So K-12 and anyone that's in the North Carolina, if you're registered as daycare, even as a home daycare provider, we have to do it. Even if you're in your home doing it, we have to do the supplemental testing. So that'll be like, that's one of the things we're gonna be doing between now and January. When we start to look at a verification contract, we're gonna be very interested in the sites that are both home childcare centers and unknowns, because we definitely do not want to have to do lead sampling at the home childcare centers.
And is it a big hurdle to include the prison in that?
So generally, what the
Because I want
EPA
to
is,
go beyond what's required
sure.
and what's good stewards of our system.
So the other bigger thing that the EPA has said is that, and if the EPA is willing to say it, I'm willing to believe it, is that they did not generally use lead above 2 inches in diameter. It just doesn't rigidly hold in that size. So the prison's water service is greater than 2 inches. So it would be highly unlikely that it's lead.
And then because both Pinewood Station and Gateway Village predate in terms of multifamily housing, the 1986 ban, when any, and maybe this is also the same thing, like it's more than 2 inches, it's not a problem, but what I really want to get to is who receives the notification? Is it the customer or the property owner?
It is the account holders mailing, that is what we're going to do, a mail merge from the account to the billing address.
Okay.
So if we have tenants, then, you know, it would be the property owner's responsibility to convey that information to them. But on these big multifamilies, it's like you said, they probably will not get a mailer because they're larger than 2 inches.
And then my final question is, what about our own town-owned facilities, many of which we know predate 1986?
Mhm.
And I'm thinking of things like the Historical Museum, which also serves the public.
We will be mailing ourselves some stuff, yes, including.
And we'll be doing the testing.
We will have to do the testing. I will have to mail Stephanie a letter saying we have a potential lead service in the cemetery. I worry about the health effects of the residents of the cemetery profoundly, but it goes to the fountain. But it does count. So we do have to mail ourselves a letter.
Those residents less concerned about, more concerned about the residents that use the museum.
Yes.
Um,
We will have to, that one I'm mentally thinking of, and yes, we will have to tell ourselves that we have lead or potential, we have unknown there. I have not inventoried that one yet.
okay, cool.
And we have not found any lead ones on our system, save the fountain in the cemetery, and we're already incrementally replacing that.
I'll come pick up the letters, you don't have to mail them, you can save the stamp.
Those are all my questions.
Yes.
Regarding the implications for compliance for the town,
Mhm.
is a lot of this information already in your database of services and the types of, connections they have, or are you starting from scratch?
We are starting from scratch. We are starting from scratch because without getting into the nerdery of GIS and everything, we just don't have it linked from our asset management system to our GIS mapping system. Now, this new asset management program that the town is going through the procurement process of now will fix that. And looking forward, we will not have this problem, but right now, we just don't have that one-to-one correlation. So we're hand building this from records right now.
In terms of the current fiscal year and the budgets that we have authorized, are you looking at additional expenses that may need to be added this year and maybe years going forward? Potentially 6 figures.
Potentially, it's when we have like in the mid 40% of unknowns, it's hard to really extrapolate. I remain optimistic in a small town that we get a great response and we can get it down enough where we can do maybe 1 or 2 verification contracts and not have to spend a lot of money. But if the optimism turns to pessimism, then we probably will have to request more funds. Now, we do have funds for galvanized replacement. So this is definitely fruit off of that tree, and we could use that fairly aggressively to start, and that way we're not talking about additional CIP expenditure. We're retasking things that are fairly related. So we, to not hit the rate model too hard. But we are looking at that as an option.
And final question is regarding the investigation between the public service and the private residents. And I forgot the phrase you used, but it was clever. Regarding, they don't tell us to do it, but we have to do it.
We have to create a set of circumstances under which it happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there, and what's the compliance timeline for that segment?
So that's that 3 and then 10. So we have 3 years to try to compress that list. We can get, our biggest problem by far and away is unknowns. Try to get the unknowns down. But after year 3, we have a 10-year window and we have to demonstrate 10% progress for each of those 10 years. So we have 13 years total.
Great.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
I know with the daycare, what if, and the concern with the kids, what about homes that are doing homeschooling?
As long as they are on what our plan to address this is, and it tracks the EPA's record, is homeschools also have to be licensed. So they have to come up with the school name and everything. So we're going to get a full export from DEA or DE, whatever they call themselves now.
DEQ.
Not DEQ, the Department of Education and
So.
DPI, thank you. DEA would be
Homeschools
funny.
are not under, homeschools are not under DPI, they're actually under the Department of Administration.
We will get a list from the licensor
Yes.
of these facilities, but that's the way the reg is written. If it's licensed, we have to test it.
Okay.
And so that, and they do have to, homeschools do have to get a license to operate. So if you're running an unlicensed homeschool, there's not really, we're not required to know about it.
I'm gonna go back to the testing of town facilities. How exactly will that work?
It really depends on how many we finally are able to get drawings on everything. You know, if we can get them off the unknown list, we won't do any of it. But if we have to take, if we definitely have lead, which is the lowest probability, we'll have to do what's called 1st and 5th liter testing. So we fill up a 1 liter jug, set it aside, dump another, fill and dump another 4, fill a 5th liter, and we send the 1st and the 5th liter for lead sampling.
And is that just one fixture or multiple fixtures?
Just one fixture.
Because I just remember UNC Chapel Hill in some pretty new facilities comparatively, like Davis Library, for example, tested positive for lead, though under the EPA threshold. And there's 125 of those on UNC's campus. So if at all possible,
Mhm.
it comes with a cost, but it's either the public or employees that are using it. If we can be more expansive in what we're testing rather than we decided this one spigot is what we're gonna test. I would like it to be more comprehensive if at all possible.
We will definitely err conservatively when doing town facilities. You know, for example, this facility was renovated relatively recently and is unlikely to have much, even the old 1986 lead solder issues. It's unlikely to have that, but some of the older facilities, you know, we will be conservative. But and you know, plus we're gonna be biased to testing town facilities anyway, because right of entry is not an issue. Except again, with cemetery.
It's also my question.
So Brian may have already answered this, but, so are you all communicating and partnering with the communications team to get some of this out before, to people in the community about before next month or?
Yeah, we have been, and again, a big thank you and shout out to Catherine's team. Our website went live today, with information. They're working on a press release now to start trying to get eyeballs toward the website because everything can be done through the town's website. So, you know, the good news there is that nobody has to go out or go to a place to do anything. You just need internet access. The flyers will be the next, you know, the formal mailers will be the next kind of wave of it. But we're trying not to over notify too much. We're trying to reduce the number. I think the big storytelling piece of this that we're gonna have to explain is there's gonna be some cases where, oh, I got a notice and my neighbor didn't, why not? Well, it's
Right.
because we have records of your neighbor and we don't have you or vice versa. And that's why we need to, you know, we're hoping that that conversation turns into data being provided so we can take them off mailing lists.
Sure, or if there's, again, ways that they can, be informed of how to check it themselves.
Yeah.
Thanks.
With the 3,000 unknowns right now,
Mhm.
do we have a number that would tell us? Like you said, Durham gave a $30 credit.
They give a $30 credit, yeah.
So is there a number where it's like, it's gonna cost us more or less, one way, like a point of unknowns where we want to
So
think
if,
of that, or?
with just the basic economics, you know, our average out of town bill right now is about $200 for water and sewer, and if it's $400 to do a test hole, then, you know, from both sides of the meter box, then we'd have to give a 2-month bill credit for out of town residents and a 4-month bill credit for in-town residents, and right now, I just don't know that we've got the financial bandwidth for that.
I'm just wondering more like if we have to, in year 3, right? Like if we've got to do all this testing all the time, like
Yeah.
if there's a point where it's like we want to entertain doing something.
There will be a break-even point at some point as we get that number down.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're close enough to it yet, where it's,
No, yeah.
whether even, you know, if we're even in field goal range right now.
The other question I had, I opened up what the homeowner would do for if it comes up on the map, because I'm actually one that's unknown.
Yeah,
So-
I'm glad you found our website.
I know, so I found your website and, so I'm wondering the add a photo portion, that's the one that Now, I'll go in under my crawl space and I'll add a photo, because I know exactly where it comes in, but I feel like that's the hurdle for folks.
It's a big hurdle. I mean, and part of it too is, you know, I talked with Jamie Rebels, who's the utilities director in Cary, and, you know, Cary's a very highly educated place. They're getting birthday party pictures, they're getting pictures of dogs, they're getting pictures of, you know, random bushes, like it's a big hurdle, but it's still the easiest thing relative to asking them to give us an invoice from their plumber and they gotta go in their file cabinet, or if they, you know, like, it's the easiest thing. But even that is gonna be a struggle. I'm definitely agreeing with you on that.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's some kind of language where the homeowner knows that they don't have to like dig up the ground right by the meter and take a picture right there, or unless that's what you need, or can they go in their crawl space?
They can go in
and
their
be
crawl
like, "There it
space,
is."
and right as it comes in, we're allowed to assume that it's the same through the wall, basically,
Okay,
yeah.
maybe, I don't know, I just don't want homeowners to think like, you know, not respond to us because they're thinking, well, I'm not gonna dig this up, I don't know how deep it is.
Yeah, I think
you know?
we can add some additional language to the website, you know, to kind of reflect that. I think that's doable. And we haven't done the mailers yet. We haven't done a full press release yet, so we can still, it's one of the reasons we want to catch y'all at this work session. If there's any big thoughts, we could put them in there and make sure we get them captured.
That's all I noticed, so, thanks.
Evelyn, did you have any questions for Brian?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like maybe we'll be hearing more about this in the
We'll
future.
be hearing more. There'll be more presentations. There will be more outreach. We'll be rolling into the next phase of testing and childcare centers and everything else. So there will probably be further communication.
Yeah, and I think one of the main reasons to bring all of this tonight is not just for looking at how this is all gonna unfold. But I think you can probably assume that when that first wave of mailers goes out, people are gonna react to it irrationally. Like without a lot of information, it's gonna be scary. So that green box that he showed you is gonna go out to people, and town board members need to be aware that you are likely to get a lot of questions. You'll probably see a lot of stuff on Facebook, and there needs to be a plan in place for getting those people who are concerned to the person who's project managing, to try to manage that part of it, which has much less to do with the actual science and figuring all this out and meeting all the regulations as it does to the perception within our community.
If only 1% of the people that will likely get a mailer react irrationally, that's still 30 people. And I've seen one person clog up an inbox. So to bookend Stephanie's point, like I want to try to push people toward facts and away from feelings when it comes to this type of thing.
But we're anticipating feelings.
We are
We need
anticipating.
you guys to see this meeting tonight, understanding that that's part of the reason that
Yes.
that Brian is going through all this, to let you know it's coming and that it's likely to come with waves of logic and true concern and some with feelings.
Despite there is a fun fact that we posted about this in the past two annual water quality reports, and we've had Tyler Freeman as our contact for anyone who is interested in lead testing. We've gotten
0.
0 reports, but I know there's probably been maybe 2 or 3 people over the past 2 years that have wanted their water tested for lead, which we have done for them. That test is, I think, about $30.
We don't want to advertise it too broadly, because if all 3,000 want a $30 test, then we will, that's gonna max out the old key card, yeah.
Me and Megan want tests.
Yeah,
Well, I know mine.
I know mine.
she's already completed her form.
I know, I gotta get a picture. But it does bring up, actually, I looked at Evelyn's is unknown. Are we offering anything for people that might not be able to get under their crawl space and take a picture?
Right now, our best path forward is to try to do that, basically use the statistics and, do them with the inventory of the, if you're a slab on grade house, we're gonna have to dig it up, or we're gonna have to make some assumptions. So, that's
Well, I'm thinking like the person who's incapable of getting the picture.
crawling under there. We don't really have a program for it right now. I mean, one of the issues too is private property. We need rights of entry, and, the amount of paperwork we would do relative to the data we would receive, I am flying solo at the moment, so.
Oh, I know, I'm just trying to think through that.
Yeah.
Like, I can go over to my neighbors and take a picture because hers is the same color as mine, but.
Yeah, I mean, we would not stop somebody from providing data and filling out if they have access, but we certainly can't compel, and we have to be careful about doing it ourselves.
I lied. I have one more question that's because of what you just said, which is I looked up, of course, Gateway Village and Pinewood Station because they were built before this ban. But then it occurred to me that Bellevue Mill was significantly built before, just as a building or a set of buildings before this came into force. And so I don't know, is Bellevue Mill on a master meter?
Yes.
Do we have concerns about, given residents' concerns about various things, about whether or not, I mean, I assume that when those apartments were renovated, it was with all new plumbing, but at some point, there's still a point where on a certain part of the meter, it's old, I would presume, old infrastructure. And so that strikes me as a place where we have multifamily that may be a point of concern when it comes to lead. Now, I have not done what Megan's done, which is go look up the map and whatnot.
They're unknown on both sides.
They're unknown on both sides. So like, I have a concern about that.
So two parts to that. First off, and I'm bringing this picture back up again. The EPA rule does not, once we get into the foundation, we're not responsible for doing any inventory of the private plumbing piece of it. Which, I mean, you know, empirically, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think the reason we're even doing the private side of it is like up north, for example, meters are in basements, and so they do the whole length. So it's to some degree leveling the playing field between meters and basements in here. But that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, remembering 2 inches and above typically wasn't lead. And you know, I guess, you know, the third thing with that too is, you know, the mill did burn down as well, so there was a lot of, you know, brand new plumbing that's put in. So when you start to chop it into pieces like that, the amount that's going to be there is pretty small. The mill houses, for example, behind the like to the northwest of where the mill building is, they used to have a galvanized line that actually ran through the sewer manhole and served all the houses. That corroded away, and we had and town staff came in and replaced it with a new PVC line out in the street. That's the kind of blessing in disguise with galvanized, especially. It doesn't do very well in our soil. Our soil is very acidic and it eats right through it. That's why that picture I showed you that came out of our system and sitting there, because it's got a big hole in the side because galvanized rusted through. So the good news is a lot of this galvanized stuff doesn't last long and had to be replaced. So again, and we have not seen a true lead service line yet. So. Yes.
I just want to say that we are still going through our record drawings. This is still a very active process. And we do have a lot of old record drawings that will show if we have the plumbing plan attached to the drawing, it's going to show that. So we are still eliminating some things. We've also talked with, we've asked local plumbers what they've seen, and they haven't really reported seeing lead service lines. Obviously, we have some great staff on our collection and distribution crews that have been here over 20 years who have not seen that. And when they do see it, they replace it. So we're using a multi-pronged approach to narrow down this inventory, and we've got a few weeks left. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear a pushback of this deadline, because it's a big effort to get the private side. And I'm sure a lot of smaller utilities probably won't make that compliance date, and maybe they'll consider extending it out. I don't think we will be the first ones that DEQ looks at either. I think they're gonna be looking at some of the larger utilities for compliance.
I've heard a hard no on any extension to the inventory submittal, but what I have heard is that 3-year window, maybe 4 or 5. Which is, I think, a little bit more. I think when they get all these inventories that have 40% unknowns on them, I'm hoping, and I know I sound ridiculous as I say this, but I'm hoping the state government will live in the real world and adjust these things, these timelines to match what they're seeing, you know, on these inventories, which is a very, very, very high percentage of unknowns. And it just, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to send that scary language to all these people when in practice, the overwhelming probability is that they just don't have lead service line.
Well, thank you. We know you guys are, oh, Evelyn, did you have a question?
Yeah, the question that You saying that all the lines have to be replaced or just the blue? The light blue?
We only have to replace if it's lead, or if it's a lead gooseneck. So,
But I have no idea. I know that Daddy said something about a copper or something about the hot water heater.
mhm,
And that's the only thing I ever remember mentioning water lines. But what about the line from I guess the line to the meter, that's for the water would come through?
yes, on the customer side of the meter.
No, on the
Town.
town side.
Yeah, we have to replace it if it's lead, and we have 10 years to do that from a certain
Okay,
date.
but what about the private?
That's where we had that special language. We have to create a set of circumstances under which it's compelled to be replaced. But the EPA does not say we have to do it. But they won't give us money to do our side if we don't want to do the customer side.
Well, there's no way in the world I'll be in that house for 10 years.
Evelyn, don't cut yourself short.
Uh,
You're gonna outlive all of us.
Exactly.
I'm a what?
You're gonna outlive us all. You will outlive us all.
That's not the point. I mean, I am not going to replace the entire, but I don't even drink the town's water, to be honest. To be
Well,
honest.
I do drink the town's water, and my children drink the town's water, and they find it.
Well, I mean, you may, but I don't. So I'm not going to, you can just condemn the house. I'm not going to replace all the water lines.
And we're not asking you to right now. We're just asking you to tell us what you have.
I don't know what I had. I don't know.
Okay,
Only thing I know was he said the copper, then the hot water tank was copper.
Yeah.
And it would live forever, so.
Yeah, well, I would be
I'd
happy
go- Probably
to-
go home tonight, it would have blown up, but, I mean, I don't know. I don't know, I just know that, I don't drink the water.
fair.
And I don't have any.
I'm happy to
I
go to
don't
your
have
house
any
this week
goldfish,
and
I
test
don't
you,
have
look at
any
your stats.
fish. So it's just me, so I'm not gonna replace all the lines just for me.
I understand. I will, with your permission, I will come to your house and I will check your service this week, and then you won't get letter. You won't be unknown.
Well, you can look from just from the street to
Okay, I can look at the town side of it. Okay,
the.
I will do
Look
that.
at the town side, but don't look at mine.
Fair.
It's very private.
Very private service, I understand. Is there anything else? Before I turn the floor over to Stephanie.
Thank you. We know this is a big complicated issue, but
Yes.
we have faith that you guys know what to do, so.
So just to add to my list of worries.
I'm sorry I've added your list for you.
Well, I mean, I've got about.
It's on my list too.
100, it's been 101 now. Thank you.
Fair. Thank you, Ms. Evelyn.
Okay, Stephanie, Ridge Walk.
Here comes 102.
There's a slideshow. If not, it's okay. But it's just hard to find. Oh. One. But that's good. Oh, okay, all right, just leave that. Oh, it's fine. Hang tight, y'all. Sorry. That's okay. Yeah, no, I thought there was the slide thing, the slideshow thing, but I don't need it. It's fine. Okay, I'm gonna live without it. All right. Thanks for having me. Excuse me. All right, so big topic. Tonight, we're gonna go over the two reports that are in your agenda packets. That is the Ridgewalk benefits analysis and the phase 2 feasibility study for Ridgewalk. It's been a lot of work
over the last year to get to this point. And I know it's a lot to digest, but I think it's been well worth it to have this extra year to dig in and look at some alternatives. I'll try to stay focused just kind of on the key findings. There's a lot of details in the reports, and if you have questions, I can try to answer them. I do think it's well worth your time to really go through all of the reports in depth, especially the appendix, which has all the community survey results. But I'm gonna stick to the key findings and the decision points ahead of us. And I'll start with the benefits analysis and then move to the feasibility study. Sarah, how come it's advancing in one spot but not? Do you have Wi-Fi? Sorry, hang tight, y'all. Having tech. Is that good? And it works? All right, thank you. Okay, yay, Sarah, she's our hero. Okay. Here we go. Okay, let me go through just a little bit of background before we jump into the benefits analysis. The Ridgewalk feasibility study phase 1 was completed last year in 2023. We looked at several possible alignments for the Greenway and sort of developed those out, but we did select a preferred route at that time. It was the only route that met all of the goals for the project. Most of the routes that we studied, you'll remember, were infeasible for a variety of reasons. You'll remember that this project faces every constraint in the known universe, right? You remember railroad, high traffic roadways, overhead power lines, underground utilities, topography constraints, streams, a river, a National Register historic district, everything. So we were able to find a path, but as you remember, the cost estimate showed that path to be over $18 million. That's a really big number for our town, for any town. And at that time, the town board directed staff to investigate other options. The purpose being to determine if there were more cost-effective ways to still make the strategic connections, but maybe loosening up on the overall sort of goals of the project, giving us a little bit more flexibility. We also decided at that time to determine what the likely benefits of Ridgewalk would be and would bring the town, so that we could identify all the advantages of the trail to help us rationalize those very large costs and also determine potential funding opportunities and partnerships. Before we get into it, I just want to say a big thanks. This was a widespread community effort. The benefits analysis would not have been successful without all of the help, all the feedback we got from the community survey, the stakeholder interviews, people gave us their time, staff, elected officials, just big thanks to everyone who participated in the process. This is a QR code that links to the report. It will also be posted on the town website. I believe JC's probably already done that. But just as a reminder, for those only arriving now, Ridgewalk is a proposed paved urban greenway, much like Riverwalk. It would run on a north-south axis connecting Waterstone, Cornwallis Hills, Beckett's Ridge, and Collins Ridge to downtown via the future train station site. The benefits analysis is meant to determine those positive impacts of the proposed trail, and the report combines sort of several different modes of analysis. First, we studied Riverwalk. And its effect on the community since its implementation 10 years ago. Brief aside, Riverwalk is almost 10 years old. The birthday is coming up on October 14th. So happy birthday, Riverwalk. I can't believe it's only been 10 years actually.
So we created and released a survey to assess residents and visitors' experience of Riverwalk and to determine how a new greenway would be received by the community. We also interviewed local business owners and community members about their perception of Riverwalk, how it's changed the town, and we listened to their ideas about the new greenway and what it would mean to them. We also collected available national studies on the benefits of greenways to communities like Hillsborough, benefits like boosting the local economy, improving public health, environmental quality, climate and sustainability initiatives, transportation and safety and efficiency, as well as equity, social and cultural benefits. So the report then assesses Ridgewalk based on the studies that we were able to find and the feedback we were able to gather to look at what all of the benefits will be to Hillsborough of this project. We spent a lot of time, as I said, gathering feedback and listening. Of course, we know that Ridgewalk is a little bit different than Riverwalk. It's more of a bike head transportation corridor with recreational opportunity, whereas Riverwalk is really sort of truly more recreational in nature. But just simply by all of the neighborhoods and destinations Ridgewalk will connect, it becomes more of a part of our transportation system as opposed to a recreational greenway. However, we still felt that studying Riverwalk's impact would help us understand more about Ridgewalk. We released the public survey in February of 2024 and held it open for 3 months. The survey was available in both English and Spanish, digital and paper formats. We placed signs along Riverwalk with QR codes that linked directly to an online survey. And this was actually how we got the most of the feedback came through the QR code in the online survey. We had a really high level with almost 600 people responding to the survey, which is a great that's a huge number for a town of our size. And then after the survey was complete, we held more than a dozen stakeholder interviews. Also in the spring of 2024, we asked the folks that we talked to if they had made any business decisions in relation to Riverwalk's opening, if community members could recount the before and after effects of the Greenway on their businesses and on the town, and if there were any anecdotes or stories that could just help illuminate how many business and community efforts Riverwalk has helped launch in its history. These are the types of questions that we asked all the participants. There was some variation, of course, just depending on whether people were related to businesses or arts and culture, organizations, tourism, environmental groups, or if they were just representing our residential community. So those conversations were very sort of open-ended and fluid. We mostly just had an opportunity to listen and then try to, gather as much feedback as we could based on where the conversations went. Regardless of the background or role in the community, the unanimous response was resounding love and appreciation for Riverwalk, which I'm sure you all know and expect yourselves in town, but it has been a project that has obviously been very well received. Most of the people who took the survey were from Hillsborough, with others responding from Chapel Hill, Orange County, Durham, and beyond. The majority of survey respondents use Riverwalk often, either between 2 and 5 times a week, once or twice a month, and almost 12% of respondents said they use Riverwalk every day. Respondents use Riverwalk mostly for physical exercise, relaxation, or leisure, also observing nature and socializing or chatting with friends were shown as very high level reasons, and some respondents also said they use Riverwalk for transportation. The majority, 70% of respondents indicated that they reach Riverwalk by car. And this is a really important statistic because it tells us 2 things. First, that Riverwalk is not equally accessible by foot to all Hillsborough residents who use it. And also that Riverwalk draws from the county, from outside of town and beyond. Respondents mentioned a very wide diversity of reasons that they come to Hillsborough in general. Riverwalk was one of the main reasons for coming to Hillsborough. They also mentioned shopping in town, dining at restaurants, visiting breweries is pretty high on the list now. The dog park, visiting friends, and more. Many respondents said that they have started exercising more because of Riverwalk and that it's been a really important part of their life. They also take visitors to Hillsborough when people come to town to visit. The majority of respondents believe that an additional greenway will enhance the quality of their life. And the average answer to that question was 9.4 out of 10 total points. So think we see a lot of support for future greenways. When we asked open-ended questions about how a second greenway would enhance quality of life, respondents expressed a real diversity of reasons that they believed Ridgewalk would enhance their lives. You can see here in a word bubble some of the responses to the question about would you use a greenway if it was there. Many respondents mentioned excitement about not needing to use a car as frequently to get to area destinations and to be able to bike downtown. Some mentioned reduced traffic congestion and access to green space would greatly increase their quality of life. Other respondents mentioned health improvements like increased walkability and mobility options. And the community survey showed that stakeholders value Riverwalk as they expressed excitement about extending the greenway system in town. The full stakeholder survey questions and all the responses are in the appendix of the benefits analysis, which I think can serve us for more than just Ridgewalk. Just looking back on Riverwalk after 10 years and being able to see, how it's been received and what it means to people has been a beneficial exercise in and of itself. In reviewing available research about greenways, we looked at how they impact various communities and found numerous studies that documented benefits to local businesses, property values, tax base, human health, environment, and social life of communities. Reports showed that trails give the greatest increase in physical exercise to groups that are most at risk for inactivity. Trails generate cost savings to individuals through better overall physical and mental health. Also, it lowers transportation cost burden, which I'll get to in a little bit. Trails can help reduce traffic congestion, improve tourism, and benefit the local economy. One study that we detail in the report analyzed 4 different greenways in North Carolina and found that for every $1 invested in greenways, in trail construction, it generates $1.72 for local business tax revenue, sales tax revenue, health, and transportation benefits. So that's a huge return on investment. The research also shows that greenways have a positive effect on nearby business activity. Greenways attract new businesses and increase the sales of existing businesses. Tourism-based trails and greenways draw people from outside the community who often become patrons of local businesses and make return trips. In terms of property values, research shows that denser urban spaces are more susceptible to large increases in property values because of a new greenway. However, small communities also receive positive increases in property values, usually within about half a mile of the greenway is where you see that bump in property value. Property value premiums can range from 3 to 5%, but there were some studies that reached as high as 15%, just in terms of proximity to a greenway. Greenways also have sorry, I'm missing a slide. That's interesting. Let me just go through that one. Environment. Greenways have positive impacts on the natural environment, including protecting tree canopy and habitat, improving air quality, reducing heat island effects, treating stormwater runoff before it reaches surface waters, which of course improves overall water quality of our drinking water sources, and mitigating flooding, which we've seen for ourselves on Riverwalk. Research shows that greenways have positive impacts on human health. They facilitate active exercise. These health benefits can be monetized for the purpose of research, which means they translate into dollars the saved medical expenses or medical costs avoided. Greenways also make exercise more accessible to a larger population, particularly low-income households, because these facilities are accessible and free to use. Overall, the studies found that the health impacts of greenways are highly positive for all users. Greenways provide users with an alternative to automobiles sometimes. When they do, that reduces traffic congestion and improves circulation in the town. Through traffic modeling, we can estimate reduced traffic congestion and other reduced automobile-related costs for a new greenway. That modeling, of course, isn't perfect. And in fact, when we modeled Riverwalk, the regional model showed that it would lead to somewhere between 39 and 49 reduced trips per day. I think it has well exceeded that in terms of how much it's used. So modeling isn't perfect, but it is one way that we can start to understand what the cost savings may be for households in Hillsborough. A study of trails in North Carolina documented significant transportation cost savings among the trails due to traffic reduction, lower vehicle collision costs, lower roadway maintenance costs, lower annual household vehicle maintenance costs because of the proximity to walking and cycling on a greenway trail. Ridgewalk is supported by many of our local and regional plans, both as specific project recommendations, but also just in more general alignment with our broad, values and visions, especially related to connectivity, public health, multimodal transportation, smart growth, climate and environmental sustainability, economic development, and tourism. There is a section of the benefits analysis that lists all of the relevant plans and compliance of Ridgewalk with those plans. It's all laid out in the report. And then one of the important steps in the future, if we move forward with Ridgewalk, will be to actually update our comprehensive sustainability plan to make sure that the correct alignment, your preferred alignment, shows in the comprehensive plan, because that's what helps us then with regional modeling, coordination with state permitting agencies on future projects, and it also will make us a lot more competitive for grant funding if the real alignment we walk shows in our comprehensive plan. That's a really necessary step. So after all the studies and after all the surveys, synthesizing what we learned from the community feedback, we found that Ridgewalk, of course, would offer a lot of benefit to Hillsborough. Like Riverwalk, Ridgewalk could become a part of the town's identity, fostering that sense of place, enhancing community connections. It could provide a space for local events such as art and cultural experiences. Several schools would have direct access to the greenway system. And I think it's reasonable to expect that additional businesses would choose to locate near a greenway. Just because we've seen that happen downtown and on Riverwalk, I think we would expect to see that along the Ridgewalk pathway at the train station, Daniel Boone, and other properties on the south side of town. Also, just keep in mind that a majority of our town residents live south of the historic district. So all of those neighborhoods I mentioned before, that's the most number of people in Hillsborough. And those folks, once Ridgewalk was built, would have access to downtown and beyond. They would have access to Riverwalk, access to activities and events that are happening, amenities, destinations, potentially without having to use a car. Transportation costs are very burdensome on households, so I wanted to take a second to dig into this a little bit, especially in a suburban town like Hillsborough. It's hard to live around here and not use a car every day, but using a car can be expensive. Ridgewalk has the potential to help reduce some of that cost burden for families because it would provide that alternative means for getting to destinations in town by foot, on bicycle, scooter, e-bike, skateboard, what have you. Ridgewalk will also connect to public transit too, which could then lower transportation costs for commuting and moving, beyond Hillsborough through the region. As you know, the town, North Carolina Department of Transportation Rail Division and Amtrak have been working for years now on reestablishing passenger rail service. In Hillsborough, the train station, once built, it's right on the Ridgewalk corridor, and it will provide a new mode of transportation to access employment centers, jobs, and other area and regional destinations throughout the Triangle and beyond, which would make Hillsborough an even more popular place to live and visit. We expect the station area will include multimodal transit and transportation options like bus service, micromobility service, having a bicycle and pedestrian connection to that multimodal hub could allow people to travel car-free. It's what we've been talking about with smart growth, transit-oriented development. Ridgewalk is a really big component of that as it relates to the future train station. And just keep in mind, if RTP builds a train station, our station starts to function much more like commuter rail than like passenger rail, simply because of the number of trains being increased and, that direct connection to one of the largest, employment centers of our region. Ridgewalk provides a venue for residents that live south of 85 to access downtown Hillsborough, which could potentially reduce some of the traffic downtown. I think that this would be most noticeable for things like events. that are happening downtown where we are sort of overburdened for parking right now, over capacity for some of these larger events. The combination of Riverwalk and Ridgewalk with a connected network of accessible sidewalks could relieve some of that congestion, which would then, of course, lead, lower greenhouse gases and improve air quality in our area. Reducing congestion and providing alternatives to that single occupancy vehicle is in line with our sustainability plan, but also our climate goals. In addition to the benefits for humans, Ridgewalk could create a natural corridor for wildlife mobility, improving wildlife safety, creating wildlife habitat along the trail. It could reduce the number of animal-related accidents that happen on Interstate 85 and other high-traffic roadways in the area. Between 2020 and 2022, there were over 800 reported animal accidents, with over $2 million in property damage in Orange County. So this isn't a major issue. The interstates are one of the areas where that happens the most and can be the most fatal. So creating that separated safe passage corridor can help protect wildlife, but it can also help save human lives. We all know, and we can prove that Riverwalk has made a tremendous positive impact on Hillsborough. And we have all assumed, and now we can show through this analysis that an investment in Ridgewalk would also multiply that impact. But Ridgewalk is a very expensive project. Oh, I'm going to get into the cost details a little bit later once we dig into the feasibility study. However, in our benefits analysis, we did lay out the numerous other ways that funding could be secured for Ridgewalk beyond just the town paying for it. Likely grants, financing, combinations of partnerships, local funds. The benefit analysis includes a full list of funding sources that we think would be a good match. And it having all of this put together helps us become more competitive for grant funding because we can show those positive impacts and what it's going to mean for our community. So the benefits analysis is meant as a tool to help us apply for and be competitive for grant funds. These are just a couple examples of potential funding sources. There are others. One of the ones I think that I'll kind of highlight is that Orange County transit tax, which is potentially a large source of funding to help with Ridgewalk. We'll just need to, once we know what our alignment is, that's when we can sort of start to put together funding opportunities and options. So that's kind of a very brief overview of what's in the benefits analysis. But before I move on to the feasibility study, does anyone want to just kind of have any questions or talk about the benefits analysis? You guys want to just move forward?
I didn't have any specific questions, but I was not overwhelmed, but I was impacted by the all the thought and all the good points that were brought out in the benefits. So there's so much more than that.
I'm so excited about this, but I tell you, it also is highlighting to me that there's going to be a difference between the north and the south. Because in terms of the property values and things like that, folks in the north won't have the same impact as they're in the south, and that it actually does exacerbate existing inequities. Properties, in the northern neighborhoods, not something we can solve today or tonight, but it's something I want to put out there that I'm assuming that we're thinking of, but this to me makes it very glaring that we will have our whiter neighborhoods will have benefit of a property value greenway walk right there. We have Nash Street sidewalk, but that ain't the same as a greenway walk that so it's again nothing that we're going to solve today, but it's something I would hope and want us to be thinking about in future.
More greenways. That's what you're saying. We need more greenways.
Yes.
I think I could totally get on board.
Beyond,
We can find the money.
so that
Sure.
it is truly equitable across.
Yeah, I think that, the comprehensive plan lays out, recommendations for greenways, trails, sidewalks, crosswalks, kind of all that pedestrian amenity, transportation and recreation. So there are recommendations in the comprehensive plan for making better, safer connections in the northern parts of town. But Ridge Walk is, I think, was always sort of conceived to develop at the same time that we're pushing growth to the south of town, where all of the rooftops are going. You know, it's thousands of people are, you know, approved
Absolutely.
development, so
And
that's
I'm not
part of the
disagreeing
reason.
with any of that. My intent though is to not lose sight of this other piece. And that we take that into consideration into the future beyond Ridgewalk.
And I think actually from a constraint standpoint, it would be easier to build some pedestrian facilities, like it's not gonna be an $18 million project, because we're not facing the same constraints, right? So this is the big one. This is the hardest connection that we will have to make ever in this town. Because of the interstates. Okay, so if you guys are ready to move on to feasibility study. Thanks for listening about the benefits analysis. So just remember, the purpose of the phase 2 feasibility was to determine if there's more cost-effective ways to make those strategic bicycle and pedestrian connections between downtown, future train station, and then eventually through the neighborhoods to Cates Creek Park. We were looking for alternative routes that still provide safe access, but we did loosen up on some of the strict rules we followed in the first feasibility study, like avoiding roadway crossings entirely. And we also had looked for the most direct route the first time. We loosened up a little bit on that and accepted some additional length for some potential cost savings. We explored several options. But let me give you before I go into the new options, I just want to remind you what the original alignment was. So on this slide, let me see, cursor. Okay, I'm gonna walk through. The yellow line is what we're paying attention to for the original alignment. So this is downtown Hillsborough. Churton Street is shown, here, but the yellow line is Ridgewalk. It followed Exchange Club Lane. It connected on Faribault Lane over to Riverwalk, where there's an entrance, and then it turned, left or east before the single lane trestle on Exchange. It rise, over a 300-foot, maybe 350-foot length, to be able to cross over the top of the railroad tracks, 23 feet in the air on a pedestrian bridge. Which spanned 110 feet, and then it came down on the south side of the tracks, where people would access the train station. It then lowered over another 350 feet back down to grade, where it turned into an asphalt trail to meet the Collins Ridge Greenway that the developer will be putting in. It went, the alignment went around the back side of the Collins Ridge neighborhood, sort of close to the back of the property, and then rise again to cross with the pedestrian bridge over Interstate 85. And what you see on the south side of the interstate, all these squiggly lines were necessary because it's coming over the interstate way above, right, for clearance. And then it has to fall down a really steep grade to get down to Cates Creek, which is at the very bottom of this hill. And so all of these squiggly lines are our, that it was basically the only route we could find to be able to have a boardwalk that was declining at a handicap accessible grade. So it's, switchbacks basically. And then it followed Cates Creek Park out to Beckett's Ridge Drive, and then connected with the existing greenway on Cates Creek Parkway to make it to Cates Creek Park. That was the original alignment. And if you look at the cost estimates on the left side of the slide, that northern segment, which we called segment 1, was about, $10.2 million. And then that southern segment was nearly $8 million. And a large part of those costs were the structures, the boardwalks and the bridges that are, structures that are very high in the air, hard to build, spanning great distances. Those types of structures oftentimes also come with really expensive life cycle costs for maintenance every year. So just keep that in mind. So that was the original. Through this feasibility study, we looked at several different alignments, some of which we found to be feasible, some were not. This one is alternative 1. It follows essentially the same path as the original, meaning this is downtown Hillsborough where my cursor is showing. Coming down Exchange on the pink line, connecting over to Riverwalk on Faribault Lane, past Ixtapa, following on the east side of Exchange Club Lane, but instead of turning left or east before the single lane trestle, this alternative allows use of that single lane trestle, and then you turn on into the rail corridor going under the Churton Street Bridge on grade, and you get to the train station on grade. So there's a little bit of retaining wall necessary for safety. There's a little bit of safety fencing in here that's cost estimated out, but you're not talking about a significant amount of structure. And of course, there's no bridge because you're crossing under the railroad through that single lane trestle. Now, the single lane trestle is already sort of a death trap. I mean, right now it's already bad for cars. When two cars meet, they can't both fit. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what's the best way to essentially give pedestrians the right of way. And luckily for us, there is a system called a hawk or beacon system, which functions like a stoplight, where a pedestrian approaches an intersection, pushes a button, and it essentially turns that into, it stops vehicles on both sides. And then the pedestrians would go through, the light would then turn green, and cars could then pass. And it's still gonna always be a little bit of like, okay, who's going first? We can probably program the lights to make those decisions. This would be sort of a smart stoplight system, and it would be the first system of this kind in Hillsborough. So we'd have to learn how to use it and program it and take care of it. But I think it's probably the only way to make that trestle safe for people. So just a couple things to remember. These estimates don't include indemnification costs for using any portion of the rail corridor. We would still have to get permission from North Carolina Railroad for this little piece that goes under the Churton Street Bridge. However, it would mostly be within the Churton Street right of way, which probably makes it a little bit easier because it would basically be using DOT's right of way. Same area that the bridge uses, and then we would be skirting out of the corridor. There's definitely safety precautions and fencing and stuff that we'd have to put into place to keep people from the tracks. But no matter what, we're gonna have insurance and indemnification costs for this alternative or the original. Anything that uses the operating corridor, that'll be true. This estimate doesn't include life cycle costs, but they're much lower than it would be if there were bridge and boardwalk involved. Still, the town has to maintain what the town builds, so just keep that in mind. Alternatives 1 and 4 typically match the same section as the original. So you're talking about a 10-foot wide asphalt path. It's about a half a mile on this one from the train station to downtown, which is considered a walkable distance. That's about the same distance as between the two Riverwalk bridges. So if you're on the Riverwalk Bridge at Calvin Street and you're walking to the Riverwalk Bridge at Weaver, that's about a half a mile. So that's the distance that we're talking. This route does have much less maintenance costs than the original because it doesn't have as much structure to maintain, less encroachment into the North Carolina Railroad operating corridor, as I just explained, although indemnification may be the same no matter what. We don't know that number yet. This alternative is the alternative that was unanimously supported by the Parks and Rec Board last week and is preferred by me as well, for reasons that I'll get into here in just a second. This is alternative 3. I forgot to go over the cost. Just to look at the cost. For this path, you're looking at about a $5.6 million project. So we've already made significant savings from the 10.2. So cutting it in about half. Alternative 3 is a little less. It's about 4.9. Now keep in mind that these costs are just estimates based on what we know now. And if we built it now, we did build in some escalation and a lot of contingency, but just keep in mind that as you move a project along, I can give you much better cost estimates the closer we get to real engineer drawings and a bid package. So the route of alternative 3 again follows Exchange Club Lane, again uses a hawk system to get under the single lane trestle, but instead of turning and using the rail corridor to get to the train station, it would actually be a pathway that follows Exchange all the way to Orange Grove Road. And then pedestrians would cross Trenton Street on a sidewalk and get on a sidewalk system to get down to the train station. They could also just follow the sidewalk system that's already in place on Orange Grove Road. This alternative is basically less greenway, more sidewalk connections. It is about twice the distance, so you're talking more like a mile from the train station to downtown versus half a mile in the other alternative, but it is less expensive simply because we're not having to build the section of trail that's in the rail corridor and because it's primarily made of concrete sidewalks instead of asphalt greenway, which there's a little bit of cost savings there, but only a little bit.
I'm missing something on these, and I said when I was going through them, and I'm still missing it.
Okay,
So where the lines in both on these alternatives, where they end?
Yeah.
They're ending Orange Grove Road, the previous one, I didn't see where,
it goes to where the Collins Ridge Greenway picks up. Collins Ridge Development
right.
builds this portion of the Greenway.
right, but we haven't addressed.
We haven't gotten to that alternative
Okay,
yet.
okay, that's what was confused. I was reading all of these and I was getting distracted.
Alternative 1 and 3 are for the northern
Thank you,
sections.
thank you, thank
Into,
you.
where you won't see it.
Yeah, and I'll go through 2 in a second.
I didn't connect the dots very well, so.
That's okay. No, please stop me. And I have, just remember my head's been buried in this for a year, so sometimes I can't see things from the outside. So please stop me if something doesn't make sense. Okay, so alternative 3 again, 4.9 million. Still makes the same sort of endpoint and strategic points along the way, but it is a lot longer. And I think the reason that the Parks and Rec Board, and Rob can jump in here too, he was at this meeting last week, Parks and Rec Board looked at all of these plans and felt very strongly that having people cross Churton Street was not safe. And especially if it's going to be a roundabout where you have free flowing traffic all the time. In order to make safe passage there, you would have to insert some type of light system, which then sort of makes the roundabout dysfunctional. So, Rob, I don't think I'm wrong in saying that.
No, you're not wrong. Again, alternative 1 is about half the distance, so it's about a half a mile, from Green Street to the endpoint as opposed to a mile, which there's people that just aren't gonna walk a mile to get to the head, but well, to get to more of a greenway. But then also, with Church Street redevelopment and it just felt better to avoid that if not possible.
Yeah, and I think there will eventually be sidewalks in a lot of these locations. I just don't know that you could still call it a greenway trail at that point, really. Okay, so now onto the alternative for the southern segment or segment 2. Originally, we talked about taking people way up and over the interstate and then way down on a system of switchback boardwalks to get back down to grade. This alternative is very different and it is completely dependent on coordination with NCDOT's I-85 widening project. There is currently a bridge over the rail line where my cursor is. These bridges have to be replaced as a part of the 85 widening. They're coming out, they're being replaced because it's going to 6 lanes. So when that happens, if we can coordinate with DOT to lengthen the bridge, basically one indent, right? Just a little bit longer, carve it out, put in a retaining wall instead of a slope, like you're seeing happening on I-40 right now for the sidewalk down near where the RTLP connection is. Then you can put a greenway under the interstate instead of over. And it's an on-grade paved trail, no boardwalk, that comes under the interstate. Much like there's a greenway in Chapel Hill near the community center, that goes under, what is that? Franklin, that goes under Franklin. So that's kind of how it would feel. And then on the other side, you come out on grade on the slope and you can basically you can follow the gentle natural slope down to Kate's Creek without having to build boardwalk. So it's a much more direct route to Beckett's Ridge Drive. Then you get on the sidewalk and then you get on the existing greenway on Kate's Creek Park and you make it to the terminating point in Kate's Creek Park. So this is wonderful. I mean, I think it's a wonderful alternative. Much easier to build, much easier to maintain, much less expensive. So you're talking about moving from an almost $8 million segment to a $3 million segment. So that's a huge cost savings. However, it can't be completed until 85 is widened. So that is something that you need to keep in mind. 85 widening right now is scheduled for a let date in I think right of way is 2030. Construction is 2032. That may change because there's reasons why this section of 85 may actually move up because of the bridge that keeps getting hit by, Hampton Point. So, but it may stay where it is. And of course, it is still possible that it could be reprioritized and pushed out. However, this connection can't be made under the existing bridge, only under the new bridge. So please keep that in mind. This one also could serve as a wildlife corridor. Wildlife is much less likely to take a boardwalk up into the air and cross a pedestrian bridge, but an on-grade crossing that's near a creek could serve as a wildlife corridor. So I think there are some benefits to NCDOT for that, because wildlife corridors are something that they're very interested in providing where they can as a part of funded projects. I have had several meetings with DOT staff, just at the staff level, about the possibility of this connection. And so far, I have heard nothing but positive response. So I think it's very possible. It's just, I can't tell you how long it's gonna be. Or if the town would need to cost share at all in lengthening the bridge. That's also just something that can't be determined probably for 3 years until engineering and cost estimates are done for 85, which is about a 2 to 3 year timeline right now. Some alternatives that we tried that don't work, just very quickly, coming down Exchange Club Lane. Before Churton Street was built, the main road into town was Exchange Park Lane, excuse me. And from 70, there was a road connection that you can still see as a roadbed today. I had hoped maybe one idea that we had was to use that roadbed and then use a sidewalk essentially to get across the railroad corridor and then swoop down and around to meet up with the train station. However, this one has been determined to be not feasible for 2 very important reasons. First of all, the sidewalks on this bridge are too narrow. They're not handicap accessible. It feels very dangerous when you're up there. I can attest to that personally. They're only 3 feet wide. And the topography and power lines and utilities and constraints that exist on this side make it impossible. There's not enough space to actually have a handicap accessible grade looping around. So this is a not feasible option. We did not do cost estimates for the ones that are not feasible. But I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that, there were many things that did not work out, but here's one of the ones that did not work out. One of the other things that I had really hoped to be able to do was make a connection to Hampton Point from the alternative 4 that we talked about, because it's so close. It's just right on the other side of the rail line. And the rail line here is actually elevated on a very old trestle. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen this, but it looks a lot like the one that you see way out Ben Jonson Road, like super high in the air near Kings Highway Park. And so I was thinking, wow, well, if we could just take the trail under that trestle and then across Kate's Creek and connect to Hampton Point Apartments in Hampton Point, that would be bringing in another huge destination in town and a lot of residents. However, the span of that rail trestle and its proximity to the creek, there is not enough space to get a greenway under there unless that trestle were to be replaced. And someday, maybe it will be replaced and we can make that connection, but as it stands right now, it would not be possible simply an engineering standpoint. All right, so then just summary of options. This is kind of where we get into the decision points ahead of you. Remember, we have $18 million for that original preferred alignment is what we called that in the phase 1 study. That estimate might actually be a little bit low because the most recent plans that we've received from Collins Riggs actually show that the greenway terminates at a grade that would necessitate additional boardwalk that we didn't know about when we did this cost estimate. So that 18.2 might be a little bit low there on the north side of the interstate. Alternative 1 and 4, if you do those two together, that's about $8.5 million, which is $9.6 million in cost savings. And it's that half-mile walk shed to downtown. Alternatives 3 and 4 is a little bit more cost savings at $10.4 million, but again, it's a 1-mile trip and it crosses South Churton Street. That would be made a little bit more difficult when the roundabout was installed. There's also a do nothing approach, just to like be clear about it. If you do absolutely nothing, no greenway, don't build bridge walk at all. You know, we do still have the plans for Churton Street widening that would include a roadside shared use path, basically connecting from the other end of Kate's Creek Parkway to downtown Hillsborough. So just keep in mind that there's that sort of secondary bike ped connection. It has a very different character as a roadside greenway, and it does have a lot of driveway crossings. It might not feel as safe for some users like young kids, but it will once it's built, and it is a funded project. Although I'm not sure when it's going to be complete. It will provide bicycle connectivity through that south part of town. So there is a do nothing approach of like all of these are too expensive and we can't tackle any of it right now. All right, last slide. Thanks for hanging with me. Management and budget divisions of the town provided this information, just mostly to kind of hone in on on these green numbers right here. These are the most important numbers. And they essentially show that there is sufficient surplus in our annual debt payments to move forward with alternative 1 or 3. If you add alternative 4, which is the southern segment, that of course can't be built until 85 is widened. But once it was, if you add that in, the debt deficit grows to about 1 to 1.5 cents on the tax rate, you know, depending on which alternative. That's what these line items are there for. This does not take into account any other funding opportunities. This would be like if the town just paid for the whole thing. We have adequate debt service that's being retired to pay for either alternative 1 or 3 on the schedule we think we're on. Once you add in the southern portion of the trail, we would have to raise taxes or finance it and apply for grants or partnerships or other things. Remember that this doesn't include any funding from the Orange County Transit Tax, which could fund a large portion of the project, including engineering and construction. So really, I hope this slide is helpful. I don't know a whole lot about the revenue side of things. This was provided by Eric and Emily, but I do think that Emily's on the call tonight. Or Jen is on the call tonight. So if you have particular questions about the details on this slide, I would probably ask Jen to jump in, or we could take those questions and then come back. This was mostly an exercise to put it in town board terms so that you guys know how to think about it. I am very good at spending the town's money. You guys have to think about what's actually coming in, but that's not my area of expertise. So really the question tonight is, I mean, I guess first of all, I would say thanks for giving me an extra year to really dig into this because I feel like it's been well worth it. It's been a lot of work. I feel like we have some options. And it's really going to be up to you guys to decide where you want to go from here. The Parks and Rec Board did unanimously recommend last week, after your packets went out, but before the meeting tonight, that alternative 1 and 4 be the ones that are moved forward.
Can I, at this point, ask Rob to kind of expand on that since you had a front row seat to that conversation. Anything you want to add to Parks and Rec Board's conversation?
Well, we, not a whole lot, other than, option 1, you know, obviously, gets us to where we want to go at much less cost. There is some of having to go under the trestle, to get there, but it was one of those things where it's kind of the best of bad options. But we felt that it could still be done in a safe and kind of controlled controlled way. Instead, I think you said in that, last week too, that there is a way that if we had to, for example, there was something that we wanted everybody out of town, and we had to egress space for everybody, we could set that light to just green. And
Yeah, that was when I was saying sometimes like if there's an accident on Churton and vehicles have to use exchange. The lights are programmable, so we would be able to just open it up in the event of an emergency.
so that was kind of one, and then 4 was kind of a no-brainer, where, 4, we're able to basically approach 85 on grade and get to the other side on grade, not have to go over an interstate. It's obviously very dependent upon NCDOT and them allowing us to do that, but it seems very, very doable with some of the things that they want to do, increase their wildlife corridors. Obviously not, if they can avoid, I think something spanning across the interstate, I think it's always better. And so those two kind of just, stood out between, and then alternate 2. No, 3 was again, just a longer distance in terms of how somebody would have to walk twice as long to get to the same place, and then also having to navigate across the Church Street was kind of the downside of alternate 3. It's a little bit less expensive, but we felt it was worth the extra, I think, 700,000 to shorten the distance and then avoid Church Street sort of, everything.
Great, thanks, Ron. Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you to direct for questions.
Yeah, so, I agree with a lot of the survey respondents, living in the southern part of town, the only way to, access Ridge or Riverwalk currently is through the use of a car. And, I attribute Riverwalk as really like the single biggest source, no pun intended, of me losing like 30 pounds in last year was walking that Riverwalk. And Commissioner Ferguson was part of that as well, getting out there and walking. So like, it's a great, Riverwalk alone, if you walk it round trip end to end, is like 7, 8, 9 miles, depending on, pick your own adventure on how you do it. To add another spur to that would be really great. And I feel ridiculous getting in my car and driving to the post office or Cup of Joe, where I could just build in, 45 minutes and I could be in downtown. I think alternatives 3 and 4 do make the most sense. And, I think the other thing to think of is when we look at who's served by potentially Ridgewalk, if you look in terms of census tracts, which is not precise because Hillsborough is split amongst several different census tracts. The most diverse census tract is the one that includes Fairview. The second most is actually the part that includes Waterstone. And so I don't think of it as like an either or. When you have young families, you have a lot of multi-family housing, especially. There's a lot of people just on race and ethnicity where like those are the 2 points of diversity in our town. And we absolutely do need to add more infrastructure on Sept 70 and whatnot, and that would be easier for a lot of different ways. Or a lot of different reasons rather, but I think both are achievable. The biggest thing that I think makes this achievable is the fact that we have a developer that's already given us the land for it. Or at least a significant chunk of it, that connects the two parts of town. On that note though, at some point, it doesn't have to be part of this, but at some point, I do think we've got to find a way to loop in Hampton Point. And it can be years into the future, but I just think of it going back to the fact that that census tract that is south of the river, that is a lot of multifamily, that is a lot of workforce housing, if you're thinking about it in terms of apartments and whatnot. And to me, they're more working class in nature. And so I want to be able to connect those folks with the businesses they're more likely to frequent, especially since there is a dedicated affordable housing community as part of Hampton Point. And really probably one of the few we have on this end of the county. And they're kind of isolated. I mean, you have to drive into a shopping center, you might not know they're there, you might see them on 85. But at some point, I know it's not feasible now, they need also access to recreation as well, and so, I don't know how that comes about, but, you know, maybe as a phase three, that's like the phase
Mhm.
three of Bridgewalk is getting these folks to be able to connect to Kate's Creek, because I would assume there's a lot of kids that live there who would love to go to Kate's Creek Park, that might want to skateboard, who might want to go downtown
Yeah.
and whatnot, and so at some point, you know, as a future phase, I think that's got to be included.
That was a huge goal of mine. Like I spent a lot of this year trying to figure out how to connect.
And I know
Hampton
you, so I know
Point.
you're thinking about it,
I mean,
right?
it was a major. I'm frustrated that we can't, but the reason we can't doesn't show on this map. The railroad is elevated here, way up in the air. So you can't do a pedestrian bridge above, you have to go below. And you can't go below an active rail corridor unless you build another rail line to move all the trains to first. And then you move the trains and then you build a tunnel. They won't let you go under an active rail line. The only chance I had there was under that trestle. And the trestle is like from 1860 or something like that. So
No,
the,
because you can't
the,
really see that.
you can't see it here on the map, unfortunately, but that trestle like will have to be replaced eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really old. And as soon as that happens, we
there's a
would easily
possibility.
be able to make that connection, because you're talking about, this is like maybe 0.15 miles. It's very, very close.
Because Bayport, is that Beckett's Ridge or is that, Greenwood? Is it
Beckett's
Ridge?
Kathleen?
And I'm glad Matt brought that up, because, you know, one of the things that opened my eyes was, you know, the gunshot survivor that stays with me. Before, she just now got a vehicle, but she was walking to Walmart. Shuddering, I shudder to think of that when she would go, but what opened my eyes was the number of people from not just Hampton Point, the south, but the north part of town who will walk to Walmart. And Collins Ridge with the railroad there, that's gonna be accidents waiting to happen, I mean. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you're thinking of that.
We would have to control access along this path to keep people from going on the rail line when we build it. That's gonna happen no matter what. Just to be clear, the original alignment did not make that connection. Like there is no way to make that connection right now. Safe. But our comprehensive sustainability plan does, of course, include sidewalk provisions on 86 to make connections on that side of town. I would just hope that eventually we would connect the two sides. Yeah.
Absolutely, and certainly what's happening now is they're coming down, it's Elizabeth Brady crossing the bridge, I mean, it's kind of scary, but anyway. However it gets done, I'm glad that is not only on your radar, but actively being looked at. You know, this is such a necessary piece. It's, you know, you know, having multiple options on egress, ingress, into town, out of town, southern point, I mean, is essential. And while, yes, there's gonna be the sidewalk on Church Street, which will be used, that's a different experience. And, I am thrilled that there is an option B with a wildlife corridor. And that was something that I was curious if we were gonna be able to pull off, you know, and the other, I didn't see that happening. So I just have to, you know, major kudos of the thought and what's been said. And the accessibility, and also just the accessibility, you know, for those different levels of mobility issues, of other types of, you know, physical, mental, I'm just excited about option B. I think that it just helps meet our goals on multiple levels.
So wait, which I'll tell.
On the option
confusing.
On your
I see, I'm looking at
page
this.
28, option B, which is
Okay.
alternative 1 and 4.
Okay, alternative 1 and 4. All right.
Okay,
I'm sorry for all the different names. It's because we had so many different versions of the study. I apologize,
I
but
was trying.
I just want to make sure I understood. Alternative 1 and 4 is what you feel like
Yeah.
is also
Yeah,
right.
and here it's option B, so I was trying to
Okay.
use your terminology.
yes,
My bad.
On this slide, and Matt, a second ago, you said alternative 3 and 4, but did you mean 3 and 4 or did you mean 1 and 4? Because 3 and 4, 3 is using the sidewalk that crosses South Trenton, and alternative 1 and 4 is still on this, on the, using the rail corridor. I just want to make sure that
Back him
I,
up on that, because I almost said something, but
yeah,
Same here.
okay,
Honestly, I was looking at cost. So
Okay.
when I looked at straight cost and the maps, that was what made the most sense,
Uh-huh.
but. If you're proposing the one above it.
Yeah.
On that other table, where you had all three. I mean,
this is the one the Parks and Rec Board suggested,
like
and it's the one that doesn't
300.
have a roadway crossing.
it's like $600,000 more. I would prefer 3 and 4, but 1 and 4 makes sense too. And both are by far cheaper than the original. I mean, I think it's kind of,
I have to ask you a question. The having folks cross Church Street is not a concern?
it's not a concern to me. No, if we have crosswalks with signalization at those crosswalks. I will also say I've crossed that without crosswalks
Yeah,
and
it's scary as that.
it's scary. But the thing that makes me cautious when other than cost, when I looked at alternatives 1 and 4 was what Stephanie had mentioned previously about having to deal with the North Carolina Railroad Corporation, and I have concerns about whether or not they might be cooperative today, they might not be cooperative tomorrow. It was going to be to me, a question
Yeah.
about the true feasibility of that. And I'd rather take that out of the equation altogether. So,
Yeah, that's understandable. Just to be clear, it's not like we've been given permission yet. We would have to go through years of permitting to find out whether or not we would be able to build this.
and if it was going to fast track the project potentially,
Uh-huh.
I'd rather go with,
Just
not
stay away
with
from
what
it.
the
I
Parks
see.
and Rec Board recommend.
All right, Mark, you had something to add?
There's just a couple of observations. And I'll start with kind of piggyback on what Matt was saying, because I can remember, it was either you or Margaret House told me that when the request was made for Riverwalk, which, took a decade of planning, that
22 years.
it took 7 years for NC Railroad to respond to the request for maybe for the underpass,
Greenway.
yeah. Going to Gold Park, and then one day it just appeared
Yes.
on her desk, that you've been approved to, do that. So that makes me nervous because of their tardiness. But at the same time, I heard you say that there is maybe some newfound momentum on their part to want to be cooperative, and that your preliminary talks with others maybe indicate that.
No, I think it always takes a long time with the railroad, and it would take a long time. But we need at least 3 years to even start engineering and permitting, so we would know a lot more. Once we get into the engineering phase, we can submit preliminary plans and see what the comments look like coming back.
I think that topic of NCRR and those delays came up in an MPO meeting in the past 6 months, and maybe that's what I'm thinking of that led me to think that there was a new sense of cooperation to get things done, because they had big plans and they know they need to make decisions in a more nimble way. Anyway, so acknowledge that it could be a delay. So, yeah, I'm definitely in favor of alternative one over alternative three, not only because it's half the distance, but with the Churton Street widening project, and if we do the roundabout in that intersection, it throws the whole roundabout, value proposition into question, so, and I don't like having to cross Churton for that reason, so I think it'd be more useful, if we were to be able to make option one, work. So some other questions are, do you feel that, you know, you've had another year and you've got the cost down half? If we gave you another year, could you make it cheaper?
Another half.
Do you need more, seriously, do you need more time to
Zip
come
line.
up or do
Yeah.
you,
Zip line
I like
would be
that.
cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
do you need anything else in terms of this planning process? In addition to the check-in tonight and direction?
No, this year has been exhaustive. This is a very, very hard connection to make, and I think we have found all of the possibilities. And I think, yeah, I totally understand where Commissioner Hughes is coming from. If we decide to go toward alternative one first, and then find out a year or more from now that that is going to be a very long or difficult or expensive or terrible situation, then at that point, I would expect to come back to the board and have another conversation and say, what do you think about alternative three now? Just to be in mind, I don't need a final decision tonight. I just need to know what you want me to follow up on next. And the next stage is engineering. This is it for concept planning. Once we have sort of a concept of what we want, then we go into the first phase of engineering. And keep in mind that with engineering, we really need to imagine at least a 2-year engineering process and probably another year or more for permitting. So we wouldn't see construction on any part of this project for 4 to 5 years. That's just the way that it is.
And regarding that proposed timeframe, I'm reminded, we've recently had a conversation about the Churton Street widening project and kind of the timeline, and that is now scored the highest in Orange County, and that the proposal for right-of-way acquisition and utility work doesn't start until 2028. So we have a couple of year buffer to be, if the railroad alternative one isn't going to work out, then
Yes,
maybe we can still slot the changes into
right.
engineering.
But in all honesty, and I can see Megan has something she wants to add too, but Churton Street widening, I-85 widening, the train station construction and Ridgewalk are all on a very close schedule. If everything were to move forward on schedule right now with what I'm thinking, they're all kind of being constructed here at the same time. Just so you know, which isn't a bad thing in terms of delivering a service to everyone. It might be a bad thing in terms of project management being overloaded from project management standpoint.
One thing we learned from Ann Arbor was folks rather just rip the Band-Aid and get it over.
Yeah.
with.
Agreed.
So the last comment I want to make.
Yeah.
Is that, there's no doubt about the value to Hillsborough of this project, so appreciate all the efforts gone into it. It's definitely worthwhile pursuing.
Awesome. I think we have 2 things. You want to go, Megan, since you haven't said
Doesn't
anything yet?
Well, I'm gonna add a little bit to what Matt and Mark had mentioned. I guess with alternative 3, just from your presentation on the Churton Street widening, I didn't see that if we had to go with 3, that it would be such a huge change that we might need for that roundabout. Is that incorrect? Like,
The problem, yeah, let me go back into that for just a little bit. So the point, first of all, I don't know if we're gonna end up with a roundabout there, because that's the one that DOT is questioning whether or not it's too close to downtown and would have spillback. The last couple of weeks, I've seen spillback every Thursday, Friday night. So we might not get a roundabout at Orange Grove Road, but if you do have a roundabout at Orange Grove Road, the point of the roundabout is free flowing traffic, not stopping traffic, not having a light. Well, if you have a constant stream of cars and someone comes to cross the street and there's no way for them to cross, you have to insert a signal to stop cars to let pedestrians cross on a crosswalk. Otherwise, they have no space. And then you've basically turned your roundabout into a signalized intersection, which is, what's the point of the roundabout then? So, but if it stays a signalized intersection, which is a very real possibility, then you could have a high visibility crosswalk and pedestrian signalization.
There's no signal on that in the proposal for the Church Street widening, there's no signal already for that roundabout?
There's pedestrian refuge and,
Okay.
yeah, there's
Because I
pedestrian
think there was
refuge.
spots, I feel like
There were,
every
but
step
it's
of the way.
refuge. It's not like fully stopping traffic. It's like one arm kind of at a time
Yeah.
with refuge in the middle.
Okay,
Yep.
alright. So anyway, as a user, I would prefer alternative one. I wanna make sure I get the right terminology. Yes, that one. Just it being the whole shorter distance. That's the one thing that out there. That's the one comment I wanna make there. The other comment I wanna make was about getting over to Hampton Point. I saw that in your presentation and I was bummed to hear that it was not feasible, but I also want, once that option is there, phase 3 would be great to connect that there. So my other concern is if 85 is not widened until 32, 33, is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
But we're gonna start building the southern section earlier than that. I mean, there's a couple things, like, is DOT like, yes, we're in it, or is it like the railroad where we're not quite sure if this is,
DOT is a lot easier to coordinate with than the
Okay.
railroad.
all right. So
I-
that's a more like, you feel more confident that we're gonna get,
I will know more in 2.5 years when they've done their engineering.
yeah,
I can't answer that question right now because they haven't engineered 85 widening.
yeah,
Until we have a cost estimate and compare it to what they've budgeted. It's gonna be a much harder sell if 85's widening is much more expensive than what they've budgeted, because then if I say, can you please lengthen the bridge for my wildlife corridor? They're gonna be like, oh, we don't have the money for it, at which point then the town has to have a conversation about contributing, or we have to find funding or somewhere, somehow.
so,
But if they can fit it in, I feel very confident that DOT, our relationship with DOT, they have always tried to help us meet our strategic goals and plans when they can. It's more of a question of whether or not they can do it without adding to the cost.
So
so,
more transparency in that
Oh,
negotiation.
definitely,
as
and
part of
relation, and
this
strong
process.
relationships.
Yeah.
so they will be doing engineering in the next 2 to 3 years
2 to 3
also for 85 at the same time, cause if you do your engineering that you're like underneath.
No,
and all of a
they
sudden
kicked off.
come back and then.
They've already kicked off 85's project. We've gotten a local planner input
Somebody hits
form.
that bridge one more time, it goes a little quicker.
Yeah, so the other part of that though, if
It's
they
Right.
would you intend to build the southern section at the same time as 85 and then push that down the road? Or would you bring the southern section on, maybe construct that first, go and head north? Or,
That's a question for you guys. I mean, I think that,
because I want this tomorrow.
you're not gonna
And-
get it tomorrow. I can tell you that right
Yeah,
now.
but now
I'm
I'm,
retiring in 12 years. If you get it before I'm retired, you're
Yeah.
lucky.
but is it, if we have to do the underground under 85, are we looking at like 30?
No, I think it could go almost simultaneous to 85 wide.
Okay, but
we
that
would
would
be
still be
ready
in the
for that.
30, 32.
We just, oh yeah,
Yeah.
30, 32 for that connection. We can't make the connection until until
Yeah.
the bridge is widened. We can get, as we know it's coming, we can get everything ready and then
Okay.
make the connection, but we can't do it until the bridge is
Yeah.
widened. For the northern segment, there's a part of me, the young optimist that is like slowly shriveling up and dying the older I get. The young optimist in me wants to be like, let's start on the northern section and get this built so it's ready to go when the train station is open. But that is completely contingent on NCDOT reviewing and permitting our plans. And with any level of certainty, I can't say how long that would take. I have to actually start the process and then see how difficult it is.
I think my optimist is like on the southern part of the, then like, let's move north and get ready. So. And that would be feasible. Sure.
And I really like that our slower is faster in the long run.
You're the
I-
Eric,
Yeah,
hours faster.
I mean, I want this tomorrow, but these are such big momentous decisions. And we have screwed up as a town wanting to get something done fast and it is permanent for hundreds of years. So I don't want us to get ants in our pants and repeat the same biases that have rendered us less than ideal.
Well, and also just to
And I
hit-
really, so,
Yeah.
and so, all that to say is, to me, it even strengthens what you're saying. It even strengthens for me for option B, that one and whatever, it would be 1 and 4. But the other piece about this is at the regional level, we're still looking at regional biped mobility connectivity. We're still looking at a regional master plan. And having this is going to be really helpful to fit in to that master plan, because the vision still is how, don't know how, is to be able to connect one end of the region to the other where there are options other than cars. So, this is a big piece of that. And again, I go back to the wildlife. That is an important component.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just to be clear, like, no, transportation projects never move forward fast, like, it would always be, no matter what you want me to build, it's gonna be 3 to 5 years away. That's just very, very normal. They're very expensive, very complicated, lots of engineering, lots of checking, plus we need to put financing and funding together, which brings me to the point that the available funding isn't until FY 29. That's when this,
Train station.
yeah, this has, again, not my area of expertise, but this is the CIP schedule that we have for Ridgewalk. So we're not talking about delaying Ridgewalk. We're still sort of on the schedule that we always anticipated. It's not gonna be here before, no part will be here before 2030. And that was kind of what we always talked about, because it just takes that long to pull together a project of this magnitude for a town of our size. For a 1-person division. It takes time, and there's a train station, so there's stuff going on. Any other thoughts, questions? Evelyn?
Well, I was thinking about how you were gonna get the animals under the road, the I-85, how, and then I thought about the trestle, and I thought about Ronnie being killed under the trestle. So,
We will not be walking people on the train tracks, but instead lengthening the bridge far out so that we can take people far away from the tracks under the
yeah,
interstate.
that's what I thought, but it just brings back memories of
Ronnie.
of him.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
I think I like number 1, then I like then it costs too much, but then I don't know, it's sort of like you should have the railroad built, and then you should get I-85 widened and things, and you're paying stuff when you don't have stuff done. That bothers me a lot. If you think about it, if you get something like, if you plan on getting something, like you said, from I-85, to get it completed, I mean, get everything done, and then the state says, no, we're not gonna do it that way. That's what, if you could
Right.
hold them to it, if you could hold them to it, make sure it's gonna be 6 lanes.
Yeah, I definitely think it's gonna be 6 lanes, but I will say that we would I would need to approach the next phase as like, I would inch forward as DOT's inching forward with 85, as the railroad's inching forward with indemnification, as Churton Street widening is inching forward, like we sort of are moving everything forward and seeing if it all still fits together, but it helps me to know what your preference is. If I know your preference, then I can try where influence is available to kind of go in that direction. Now, I might hit a hard stop eventually, and then I would have to come back to you and say, I'm really sorry, I couldn't deliver this, part for whatever reason. Here's the other alternatives, but there's not a lot of alternatives on this project, unfortunately.
Do you feel you have what you need?
I mean, I heard,
This one.
yeah, go ahead. Rob.
Well, I just want to clarify something too. So from what I took from, I think, maybe just listening to you and notes and stuff too, that alternative 4, we obviously need to wait and negotiate and talk with NCDOT and kind of let them know, what we're thinking, but that's going to be a ways away. But I think what I heard from you for all 1 is you wanted to move forward with engineering for that part.
Yeah, thanks.
Clarify that.
Yeah, I need to clarify that. it would help me immensely for alternative 4 to make it into our comprehensive plan. Because right now we show a pedestrian bridge and we have a spot project, a
Yeah.
STIP project for a pedestrian bridge. So I can't, I really need DOT to see this alignment as our preference in our comprehensive plan in order to be able to have those higher level conversations outside of staff.
So do you need a vote for that then?
Yes,
Okay,
Yeah,
we're
I'm
gonna
not
need to
hearing
vote for
any
that, but
noise against-
let me finish. That one is really important to get into the comprehensive plan. As soon as you have decided that you would rather do that than go over, we need to do that. Alternative 1, I think. Let me think about this for a second. If there is a majority preference for this, then I think indicating that you want me to keep working on this and start the first phase of engineering would be very helpful, although I don't think that would start it wouldn't start right away this year. We have to make it work with our budget and CIP, but I would at least know that's where we're headed when engineering funds are available. And if I can find a funding source for engineering, then I can apply for money that could help us start engineering on that phase. It also helps in the event that there is an opportunity to talk to the railroad while we're permitting the train station on making this connection. If it's in the comprehensive plan, if you guys have said this is your preference, then that might help as well. Because there's a lot of coordination with the train station right
So
now.
you need a motion tonight?
I think it would be helpful, and this, Bob,
That's where you can substitute into the comprehensive and the new map.
Because I would like to move that we, authorize you to pursue alternative 1, alternative 4.
A motion.
Yes. That's it. Yes, that is a motion
Into the comp plan.
into the comprehensive
second
plan.
that.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any more?
Once, I mean, this is an amazing, work they've done over the last year, and to take something from, $18 million to, to roughly 9 million. Which is the same kind of, from point A to point B is pretty remarkable, but I really appreciate, no rock unturned in looking at it, kind of all the options that, they're there, and they're not very good options, a lot of them. So, thank you for your work on that, but also just kind of continuing to just move us forward. I think this is, I think we all, recognize, what Riverwalk has brought to Hillsborough, and it's, what people think of Hillsborough now, they kind of think of Riverwalk. And I think, north-south, Greenway would also just add to opportunities for not only businesses, but people getting from north and south, obviously, in a safer way. And I think it would tremendously benefit from that too. So, super excited about, those possibilities, but keep pushing.
Thank you, Rob. Nice words, and I think we all agree. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Steph.
thank you so much. Sorry to take up so much time at a workshop, but that's what workshops are for, so,
This is so freaking amazing.
okay. Sarah, is there another,
No, I'll.
Okay. all right, thank you so much.
Connection here to point two cents.
Okay, do we have a motion to move into closed session?
To go, yes, into closed session.
Thank you,
If I get
Kathleen.
the words
Is
out.
that everyone's second? Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. We'll take a couple minute break.
I'm trying to read.